You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. I always find it interesting whenever we get at certain points of the college football offseason and Las Vegas uses those as benchmarks to update their projected win totals. This typically happens at the end of a previous regular season, at the end of a signing period, and then now you've got the first transfer portal window and the spring portal window. So typically what we would see for years is post-spring practice, you would see updated point spreads and Vegas odds for the upcoming season. And then what's happened, obviously, with the transfer portal is that's changed the college football calendar a little bit. And so it's pushed things a little further into June, which is typically when you start to see students arrive for summer school and start going through off-season workouts, and you have a better sense of what a roster is going to look like. For example, how tricky would it have been to put a win total on Colorado football 6 weeks ago? They lost 47 players since the end of last season. Even post-spring, they lost 20-some-odd players. So Colorado would have been very challenging. Now, that is a bit of an outlier. Incidentally, Circa Sportsbooks has Colorado at 3.5 wins this year. 3.5 for Coach Prime. By the way, I'm taking the over. And Muse, what about you? Prime, are you a believer over 3.5 for Coach Prime?
In year one, I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
I'm gonna say no.
We'll go through it, but I think he's gonna get over it. We'll do that in a bit. But that's not the point of this. The point of this is more so to look at LSU and the SEC. So Circa Sportsbook has updated their projected win total. So I figured let's go through it. Can you just give me a little bed music, whatever you got there? I don't care what it is. Just hit a little something so we have a little ditty there in the background while we run through all of this. And we will start with the Alabama Crimson Tide. I guess we could just sort of go alphabetically here. Vegas projects, and this is Circa Sportsbook, again, updating their win total, is they've got Alabama at 10. What's interesting about that is we've talked a lot this offseason about Alabama as a team that, for me, has to prove it. And typically you've seen Alabama what with Georgia as far as would they be at 10.5 or 11 or higher with their win total, just would they win or lose a game. To see Bama down at 10 is a bit surprising and somewhat validating. We'll get to that. Expect a little bit of a bounce back for the Hogs. They got them at 6.5. 7 for Auburn, year one under Hugh Freeze. The Florida Gators. This is the one where you could go, eesh. Are they going to be looking for a new coach? How about 5 and a hook? And you know what? They may not go over that 5 and a hook. We'll run through their schedule in a bit. Georgia, the two-time defending national champ, not a great surprise. 11.5. Basically, will Georgia lose a game? When you look at their schedule, that makes a lot of sense as well. Just going alphabetically. Kentucky, they have at 7. I was listening to the Chuck Oliver show yesterday. For those who don't know, Chuck does a great job. Based out of Atlanta, does a 365 college football show. It follows us here in Baton Rouge on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. And he had a national college football writer on who projected Kentucky at 10 wins this year. Does that sound wild? I mean, Circa has them at 7. 3 wins over your projected total? 10?
That's especially losing your quarterback. I mean, you lost Will Levis. That's a little.
But they bring in Devin Leary.
They do bring in Devin Leary.
NC State.
That's fair.
But
that is fair.
I think it's more so. Will Levis was just beaten to oblivion last year.
Yeah.
Their offensive line was atrocious. Can they fix their line? Cavassier Smoke is transferred out. You lose Chris Rodriguez to the draft. That was a bold projection that I heard yesterday on the Chuck Oliver show. Your LSU Fighting Tigers, Circa has them at 9.5. So holding steady, a half game off of where they have Alabama. If you're watching, it's LSU's on the third column at the top right there at 9.5 wins. Mississippi State at 6 wins, year one under Zach Arnett. Again, we'll run through these and give you some individual thoughts on each of them. How about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss at 7? Remember last year we talked so much about how the first 8 games of that schedule were a breeze before they got to LSU, and then it looked airy after that. And it was basically a grind to the finish, and it certainly proved to be for Lane Kiffin and the rest of the squad there. South Carolina, which had maybe the most surprising year in the conference a year ago, year 2 under Shane Beamer. They got South Carolina projected at 6. Tennessee is going to be one of the most interesting teams to watch, I think, in all of college football, because if Joe Milton can replicate Hendon Hooker's season, not easy to do, but if he can, then you have a team that's a contender in the East. Because the East is winnable. And we'll go through, and I get they have to play Alabama, and we'll go through some of what the cross-divisionals will look like, but Tennessee at 9, I think, is maybe the most interesting team in the entire league. And then the one that everyone sort of loves to hate and laugh at, Texas A&M, 8.5. So while the blue chip ratio favors Texas A&M, didn't we say yesterday blue chip ratio, 4th most talented roster by recruits? Wasn't that where they were?
Yep, 4th.
It was Bama, Georgia, Clemson.
I thought Ohio State was in there, too.
That's it. It was Ohio State, A&M, Clemson.
Yes.
That was your top 5. A&M, 8.5. They can't get over 8 wins to 9 this year. What a giant problem that would be. So, again, to run through it, Bama 10, Arkansas 6.5, Auburn 7, Florida 5.5, Georgia 11.5, Kentucky 7, LSU 9.5, Mississippi State 6, Ole Miss 7, South Carolina 6, Tennessee 9, Texas A&M 8.5. Muse, which stands out the most of those? Just immediately, boom, which one stands out the most?
I want the over on South Carolina because they've done it 2 years in a row, and I feel like 6 is low. I just do.
And the other thing I'll tell you with Carolina that does make sense as far as that is the SEC East is, on paper anyway, weak this year.
Yes.
I could make a strong case that South Carolina, after Georgia and probably Tennessee, is the next best team in that league.
I think that's very fair.
Here you go, South Carolina. They play North Carolina in the opener in Charlotte.
It'll be tight. It'll be a tight game.
Drake May there at North Carolina, good offense, but Carolina last year had a very disappointing season. Furman, they got a win on the schedule. They go to Athens. That's probably a loss.
Yeah.
Their cross-divisional at home is Mississippi State.
Dub.
And especially Zach Arnett. First year. I know Will Rogers is back and all this stuff.
Got to be one of their first road games, too, I would think.
We'll get to State in a second. At Tennessee, tough because it's on the road.
I'd probably say that's an L.
So it's 2 L's for them. Florida at home.
Win.
I think so.
Yeah.
Especially we don't even know who's going to play quarterback for Florida. And you get Spencer Rattler back, who finished very strong for South Carolina. They're at Missouri.
Win.
They're at A&M.
That's a toss-up, but I don't hate them in that game.
They play Jacksonville State.
Yeah, that's a win.
Play Vanderbilt at home.
That's a win.
Kentucky at home.
That's a win.
Clemson at home.
They beat them last year on the road. I mean, who's to say they can't beat them in Williams-Brice, man?
You just pegged South Carolina 10-2. You basically did for South Carolina what the guy I heard yesterday on Chuck Oliver's show did for Kentucky. For me, the most surprising thing is just to hear a projected win total for Florida at 5.5.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that I think Florida can't get over that number. It's just, or that they're deserving of being higher. It's Florida. And to hear Florida projected, it's not to say like, for every program, the bottom could fall out in a given season. But to be projected by the odds makers to say, based against that schedule with the talent you have or don't have on your roster, we think your total is 5.5. That is stunning to see. But I'm going to tell you the other thing that is somewhat, I would say, validating. It's seeing LSU at 9.5 and Bama at 10. Brian Kelly, while I was out, Brian Kelly was on the Feinbaum show at SEC Media Days, and he let you know how he feels about his team.
We're going to have a good football team. We're going to have to play smart and, all the adages that you've heard many coaches who have sat next to you talk about. We're going to have to stay injury-free. But we've got a quarterback that is developed, and we've got probably confidence now that we can go into games and believe that we can win. Those are really good things to have when you go into a conference like the SEC.
Now, Brian Kelly's confident. I think he knows he's got a bit of a loaded gun right now with this team. And he's not the only one. Look, while I was out as well, Kirk Herbstreit did an interview with On3, and here's what Herbstreit said about the SEC West and the SEC as a whole, and where he sees LSU.
As we sit here, what are we, May 31? It's hard for me not to lean towards Alabama in the SEC just because of what you described. Now, you got LSU, who made incredible strides in that first year with Brian Kelly. Got a lot coming back from that team. They beat Bama last year. They got to go to Tuscaloosa. So those three are going to be everybody's three. As we sit here right now, I'm going to wait to see where we are in August. But I would be in that Bama LSU. just a little bit ahead of Georgia.
How about that?
Getting into the summer months.
Bama, LSU ahead of Georgia. Now, the hat tip to Georgia is their schedule, which is quite honestly laughable. They will have to no-show for a game. And like that almost happened last year in Columbia against Missouri. Missouri had them dead to rights. And Missouri gagged it away. They were a red zone possession away from a 2-score lead late in that ball game that Georgia would not have had enough time to come over to overcome. But you look at Bama; they open against Middle Tennessee, then they got the game against Texas. That's at Bryant Dennehy Stadium this year. They play at South Florida. Why are they playing at South Florida?
It's a great question. I don't have the answer to that.
That's
should never happen. That should never happen.
Bizarro world. I mean, unless if he's just trying to go play in Florida, like down in Tampa for recruiting purposes or whatever. I mean, it is in Raymond James. It's at an NFL stadium, but to play that game at South Florida is bizarro world. Ole Miss is at home. They go their road conference games are at Mississippi State, then at A&M, which A&M beat them in College Station 2 years ago and almost beat them last year. So you have to at least respect that, and that's middle of October. They're home again. Then they go 3 straight home games: Arkansas, Tennessee, open date LSU. That's going to be Alabama's schedule. Like that. That's going to tell you what their season is that stretch right there. At A&M, home against Arkansas, home against Tennessee, open date LSU. That stretch is it for Alabama. If they come through that unscathed, they'll go undefeated and win the SEC West and go to Atlanta. There's a possibility they stub their toe a couple of times there, and if one of them's LSU, LSU's back in Atlanta. And then they're rotating cross-divisional. Bama goes to Kentucky this year, then they finish up with Chattanooga and Auburn on the road. I'll tell you, man, the questions they have at quarterback against that schedule, I'm not so sure I'm taking Bama over the number. I might pick them on the number at 10-2, but I certainly wouldn't pick them over the number of 10. And if that draw, if I could get a hook with that, I would take the under. So something worth keeping an eye on as we move through it. So updated win totals for college football here as we move through the summer months and get closer to the start of fall camp. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.